All right. Thank you everybody for joining us today. Folks should be connecting up here in just a second. Thanks all for joining us today for Grow With Us to talk about fermentation and preservation and all kinds of great stuff. My name is Jordan. I'm with the Dallas Public Library. And I just want to go over a couple quick housekeeping things before we get started. So we notice that your camera and microphone are disabled. That's so we can focus on our presenter and the great content they have to share with us. If you do have any questions, you can put them in the chat and we'll address those when we have a moment. Other than that, I'll leave it over to Nedra, who will introduce our speaker for today.
Thank you, Jordan. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being with us today, and we're very excited to continue our partnership with the Dallas Public Library to present this free program. My name is Nedra Richard Morgan, and I work for the Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability. Our division is one of over 70 city departments and divisions within the city of Dallas, and our day-to-day focus is on environmental activities, processes, programs, and major plans such as the Comprehensive Environmental Climate Action Plan, also known as CCAP, and our Urban Agriculture Plan. Within the CCAP, Goal 7 is all Dallas communities have access to healthy local foods. Even in a city of this size, getting to a store or a market with fresh produce can be a chore. The purpose of this goal is to find innovative and standard ways to ensure that all Dallas residents have access to this food source. Our programs range from A to Z, air quality to water conservation to zero waste. As the city celebrates Earth Day on Friday, April 22nd, events and plans are underway, such as the North Texas Climate Symposium. It is free and open to the public, so please join us to hear our featured speaker, Dr. Earthia Nance, EPA Region 6 Administrator. You can go to dallascityhall.com and select City Calendar, then register at that link. The program will be presented via WebEx. I would also like to mention EarthX Expo will start Friday, April 22nd and end April 24th at the Kay Bailey Hutchison Convention Center. So please join us at EarthX. The City of Dallas has a large pavilion which showcases 18 city departments and divisions. The show hours are Friday, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m., Saturday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., and Sunday, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Kay Bailey Hutchison Convention Center is located at 650 South Griffin Street in downtown Dallas. Free registration at earthx.org, and I will also drop in the chat. Today, we welcome Jessica Alonso of Native Ferment, Texas, to the program. Native Ferment Texas is a Dallas-based food company focused on creating complex flavored pickles and other preserved foods and fresh seasonal produce from Texas farms. Offering fermented foods and beverages are becoming even more popular. You can now find fermented kombucha on tap in bars, sourdough bread in cafes, and more varieties of yogurt, sauerkraut, and kimchi in your local supermarket. Fermentation has a health benefit, and these foods have been a part of the human diet for centuries. It all started as a way to preserve foods, improve flavor, and eliminate food toxins. Today, more people are turning to these foods for their potential health benefits. Our guest speaker was first introduced to pickling and fermentation while working as a line cook at a fine dining restaurant in Dallas. She quickly found herself fascinated with the history and endless preservation techniques as she began to delve into her research. Jessica has staged in California and attended fermentation workshops in New York and Austin. Using this information she's learned from those workshops, on-the-job training, and her own research, she has worked hard to build an extensive understanding of fermentation and its health benefits. Jessica has personally worked and built relationships with all of the local farmers that provide her with the produce she uses for her pickles and ferments. She believes in the importance of supporting small family-built and owned farms and has an immense amount of respect for all of their hard work. Utilization plays a big role in her approach to fermentation as it pushes her to find new and innovative ways to preserve. Inspired by traditional techniques from various cultures, she enjoys making those techniques her own and strive to apply the Texas touch to locally sourced ingredients. Native Ferment Texas' mission is to provide sustainable probiotic fermented foods to the public while educating people about the importance of preservation and fermentation in their daily lives. Please help me welcome Jessica Alonso to the virtual podium.
Hi, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining in today. And thank you, Nedra, for that really extensive intro. I really appreciate it. And thank you for highlighting my business, Native Ferments TX. Yeah, so just a little bit of background behind what I do. Again, my name is Jessica Alonso. I've been a chef here in Dallas for 6 to 7 years. I've just this year moved on from the industry to focus on my small business called Native Ferments TX. I started it back in March of 2021 and have slowly tried to gain some momentum. And I think this year I'm doing it full force. So as Nedra mentioned, I do work with local Texas farms. I've created those important relationships with them over the years as a chef. And it was a no-brainer when I started this fermentation business that I would obviously support their small farms and support their families and their hard work. So that's a big important basis of what I like to do. I enjoy fermentation and the transformation of ingredients that happens throughout that process, and to be able to help support local is just really important to me as a business owner as well. So right now, this year, Native Ferments, we have grown a little bit. We're still really small, but we've implemented some shipping is now available. So that wasn't available last year, but we moved into how to ship fermented foods safely. So that's a really exciting step for us this year. We're working in some new farmers markets as well than we did last year. So right now you can find Native Ferment products at the White Rock and Lakewood Village locations, or farmers markets, through Good Local Markets. And then starting in May, we'll start selling our products through the Capel Farmers Market. So it's growing slowly but surely. So I'm really excited about that as well. I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with Profound Micro Farms. They are a farm that's located out in Lucas, Texas, which is north of here, the DFW. But they are an amazing farmer and local artisan hub. They're a functioning farm themselves, but they also are a hub for local bread makers, baked goods, artisans, and other small farms in the area actually send product to them, and then the public is able to sign up on their website and go shopping essentially, and it's all local. And then Profound has a team of people that actually delivers everything to your house. So I'm excited to announce that I will be selling Native Ferments through Profound Micro Farms as well. So that's another avenue to provide sustainable and probiotic rich foods to the public, which is essentially my mission with Native Ferments, and to be an educator and help people understand the fundamentals of fermentation, and that you don't have to be intimidated by it. You can do it at home and you can do it safely. So I think that's really important, because you not only minimize food waste through that, but you create all of these different flavors that you wouldn't normally find at a grocery store. And you get, an extra sort of boost of confidence I guess what I'm trying, I guess, like, you've made it with your own hands, so you have a more of appreciation of the food and the process itself. So that's a little bit about me, and like where you can find native ferments and what I've been doing to try and build it. But today in the class, I'm going to go over some ways why minimizing food waste through fermentation and preservation is important, and some examples on how to do that in your home kitchen. And I'll do a demo of a lacto fermentation project that you can do. It's just as a baseline, and some tips and tricks on having a successful ferment done in your house. So I'll go ahead and go into the first slide. So why are we doing this? Why are we reducing food waste? Why is that important? Doing the research for this presentation and looking at all the numbers and studies that have been done, it was pretty eye-opening and appalling as to how much food is wasted in the US. I found, like, on average, it was 1/3 of all food in the US goes uneaten and ends up in landfills, which I thought was insane, because we have a certain number or a certain percentage of population that is suffering from, like, food insecurity. They don't know where their next meal is going to come from. And it's just really sad when I think kind of take things for granted and realize how much food is wasted every year. Another reason why it's important, you can conserve resources and energy. So what I mean by that is it takes time, effort, resources to transport, store, and compost and all of this waste. So where does it go? It takes agricultural land to store and make those landfills, and then the transportation that it takes, the resources, the manpower that it takes to get all of the food to the landfills. That's another wasted resource. So we'll be able to, by minimizing and reducing food waste, we can conserve that energy and resource there. Another reason would be to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. That's a big one. I think it's like 85% of the greenhouse gas emissions come from the process of transporting and producing and transporting the food to the landfills, and then the methane that is emitted from the actual food decomposing. So it just kind of is a cause and effect sort of situation, and we can help improve that situation immensely by reducing our food waste. And then lastly, I think save money. I found this little tidbit. The average family of 4 spends $1,500 each year on food that ends up uneaten. I found that on the Environmental Production Agency's website, or EPA. And I thought that was pretty insane, like $1,500. I know now, especially now, since inflation has gotten pretty crazy and everything is so expensive, that can make a big difference in a family's financial situation. So those are just some ways why I think food waste is important now. If we go to the next slide, can kind of go over some easy ways to reduce food waste in your kitchen. First one, vegetable scraps. I don't know if you can show, I have some examples to show for this here in the kitchen that I have personally. So I don't know if we want to go back to camera so I can show off. Okay, cool. So here, something that's really prevalent and people don't think about and just end up composting or throwing away are onion skins or garlic skins. These scraps here can be dehydrated and you can make your own onion and garlic powder to use at home. I have a food dehydrator personally, so I just set it to my vegetable setting and let that dehydrate for about 8 hours and it's fine. If you don't have a food dehydrator, you can definitely use your oven. Just spread these out on a baking sheet lined with parchment, and on the lowest setting or the oven light setting, you can dehydrate these peels and then powder them. So that's what I have as an example here, is a mixture of garlic and onion skin scraps. And I just incorporate this in any recipe that calls for, garlic powder, onion powder, anything like that. I've used it in marinades, salad dressings to help flavor it, things like that. I have some more examples here of some stuff. This here is dried celery scraps, which is really tasty. I've used that to flavor soups before. The tops to onions, like scallions, if I notice I'm not going to get through them all in time, I will either freeze them to make add to vegetable stock, or powder them and add them to my cooking that way. This is a kimchi powder. So I had a personal batch of kimchi that I made, and I left it out on the counter too long for my personal preference. It got too sour for my palate. So I ended up dehydrating it and making it into a powder so it's nice and sour and spicy. So I really like incorporating these as well. So another way to use vegetable scraps, like I have some carrot skins. I peeled some carrots earlier. You can kind of compile these vegetable scraps and choose to freeze them until you have enough vegetable scraps like celery, onion scraps, garlic scraps, things like that. You can freeze those together and then later on make vegetable stock once you have enough. Another example of vegetable scraps here I have, I don't know if you can see, but they're the roots to green onions. So normally, like, not a lot of people know that the roots of the green onion are actually edible. A lot of people just end up composting them or throwing them away, but it's added flavor. It's still going to taste like an onion. So I have these here that are brining in leftover kimchi brine. So again, whole utilization being a big part of what I do. I save my brines as well. It's good to just take a shot of brine. You get your good probiotics that way. I've made Bloody Marys with kimchi brine before, which are really good. You can use the brines to season soups. I've added it to hummus for to get a little bit of a sour, spicy punch, things like that. Another example I have for you here is vinegar. This is actually a carrot scrap vinegar. A lot of times you have like fruit scraps and stuff like that. You can make a pretty easy vinegar at home with just your scraps, sugar, water, and then a little bit of a starter vinegar like apple cider vinegar. So that's a good way to repurpose any sort of fruit scraps or anything like that. You may have citrus peels. If you do use fresh lemons for cooking or seasoning. Don't just juice them and throw them away. Take the peels off first. You can dehydrate them. And I've used the citrus powder in like pastas, things like that. I've tossed vegetables with olive oil, salt, pepper, citrus peel, and it's really tasty and bright. You can candy the peels. Done that before. You can make a marmalade. To be able to do that, you have to have a substantial amount. So I would, it's okay to freeze them, freeze the zest. That's totally fine. And they will keep in your freezer. So if you zest them before you juice them, you can also use the zest and make a citrus salt. That's really good as well on vegetables. You just do equal parts of the zest to the salt and massage it together with your fingers. And it's really tasty. It's bright, and then you have the salt component there. Another way to utilize some citrus peels would be to make your own household cleaner. I've done that by infusing distilled white vinegar with, I had orange peels and lemon peels available, and then a sprig of rosemary. And I let that infuse for about 2 weeks. And so it was nice and citrusy. And then you have a little bit of the rosemary in there. It was really nice. And then you just use that as your household cleaner by diluting it with equal parts water to vinegar, and you can clean any surface with it. So the next product you can use, dairy. That may be something people may not be able to get through over the week. If we could, I have an example and show some people here. Here I have homemade yogurt. So I had a half gallon of milk I had a gallon of milk, but I had about half of it that I wasn't going to get through in time before it expired. So I ended up making my own yogurt here at my house, so I wouldn't have to dump the milk or anything. But so I have this thick yogurt, but I had to strain it to make it thick. And the whey, which is the byproduct of making yogurt, is what I have here. One really interesting and cool thing about this, so it's a little sour when you taste it. That's where the lactobacillus and all the sour comes from in the yogurt. You can actually substitute whey or cheese whey in the same sense, yogurt whey or cheese whey in any in a lot of baking recipes. I actually made biscuits the other day with using yogurt whey instead of water in the recipe. So and that's just an example of what you can do with a byproduct. Excuse me. You can also, if you are a big fan of cheese and you have Parmesan on hand and you go through that and you're just left with the rinds, save the rinds. Those are like flavor gold. You can add those into soups, stocks, and it gives this amazing, like luscious cheesiness to it. I've made what's called a Parmesan brodo, which is more like Italian. It's just got a bunch of parm rinds, onions, garlic, fresh herbs, a little bit of onion, and it's just, you're essentially making like a soup or a stock out of the parm rind itself. So always save those. Those are always delicious. And then another way, I was just trying to think of like ideas of things that I know are in every household that tend to be forgotten and thrown out sometimes. So last example I have is bread that's going stale. I like to use that to make French toast, bread pudding, turn them into croutons or breadcrumbs. It's always a good way to turn those into something useful. Okay, I think that kind of covers like some everyday kind of waste that you would find in your kitchen kind of examples. I want to start going into why we ferment. Why is it important? Why do we need to do it? Why do we need to have that be part of our everyday life? So if we could go, to that. So first off, to preserve. So Nedra touched on this a little bit in the intro. Fermentation has been a big part of civilization for thousands of years. It's nothing new. We just kind of, with developing, civilization and everything, we just kind of somehow forgotten about it, or it got pushed aside because we wanted more convenient and instant sort of food as time went on. But it's been part of our civilization for a really long time. And it became a priority out of essentially necessity for older civilizations, because prior to pasteurization and refrigeration, fermentation was the main way for people to be able to live throughout the year and have a food source. They were able to preserve their harvest and any other perishable food throughout the year. It was essentially, like I said, out of necessity, because people were dying off because of a lack of food in the colder months. And so people were really trying to find a way on how to make sure that they were going to see another season, essentially. I know that sounds really morbid, but, out of necessity, this whole fermentation thing kind of grew. The next one I want to go over is to create flavor. This is a great component for you at home, because you can't really find these flavors at a grocery store, or walking down the aisle in a grocery store. So fermentation can create a wide range of complex flavors and textures. Just the sorry, I got off track here. Some of the world's most highly prized foods are fermented. When we think about it, cheese is fermented, sourdough bread, sausages, beer, wine, vinegar, and not a lot of people kind of put that in perspective. It makes everything taste better and is good for you. So if we want to go to the next slide, talk about some of the good health benefits with fermentation. So we know everyone talks about gut health and probiotics and everything like that. Fermented foods contain some of the most beneficial bacteria that will restore the balance in your gut. It's just study after study, it does help. It does happen. Now, in some cases, you do have to be careful. Like if your immune system is compromised, or if you are critically ill, then you need to have a physician there to guide you through that process and make sure it's safe enough for your body to handle. But for most people, it is beneficial. It does reduce a lot of digestive issues because of the enzymes that are present during fermentation process. It allows the nutrients, your body, to absorb the nutrients in the food easier. It's easier for that to happen. So your body's absorbing more nutrients than it would a raw food. Your body has a harder time digesting a raw food, like just as an example, it has a harder time digesting raw cabbage than it would sauerkraut. It just has more nutrients. It's able to soak up all of that and digest it easier. So during fermentation, microorganisms generate various nutrients and vitamins. So, I mean, another win there. As I was delving into more research about the good probiotics and things in bacteria, I was finding that all the bacteria that's in the fermented foods can improve symptoms of high blood pressure, which I can kind of give you an example of that for me personally, because I was placed on high blood pressure myself, but high blood pressure medication by my primary care physician about a year and a half ago. And since I've had a good, along with a balanced diet and incorporating, I like to eat kimchi in the morning. Doing that, I haven't been on my blood pressure medication for about 5 months now because it's been regulated. So, and I feel like that is not only to all the probiotics found in the kimchi that I'm eating, but balanced diet as well. So, but I feel like that the probiotics they do help me feel better. And I feel not as foggy in the morning, if that makes sense. And I have more energy. Again, going back to the slide, those certain strains do decrease cholesterol absorption, reduce inflammation, and improve your immune system. So just really great things happening in your body when you have these amazing bacteria and probiotics available. Okay, so that kind of covers why fermentation is important, not only because of it helps you minimize food waste. It's good for you. It was, discovered out of necessity, and it's to create flavor. I'm going to go ahead and show a demo here. I have, let me go ahead and pull out everything that I have. I'm going to show you guys how to do a lacto fermented carrot and asparagus project. Here I have, it's like 3 or 4 asparagus stalks and about 5 or 6 carrots. These were just left over in my fridge that I wasn't getting to. And I didn't think it was going to be enough for my family. So I have that. I have 1 sprig onion that I found as well that wasn't getting used. Salt, my spices, filtered water, and a glass jar, and a funnel. I do want to kind of go over a little bit of intro tips if you've never done fermentation before. You want to make sure that your vegetables are cleaned. If you see any bruising, brown, black spots, anything like that, that does need to get disposed of. You don't want that to take over your ferment. You want to make sure your workspace and the vessel or jar that you're using for your ferment project is clean. Make sure your hands are clean. And you're using filtered water, and the salt that you use is an all natural sea salt. Do not use table salt. It is usually an iodized table salt, which means there's added iodine to it, which actually stops and kills off the beneficial bacteria that you want to happen and grow during the fermentation process. So nothing would actually happen. It would just be really salty and probably wouldn't taste very good. It would probably start tasting metallic, actually. And then a lot of store-bought salt have anti-caking agents. So you want to stay away from those as well. Make sure you're reading your labels. But this is an all natural sea salt here that we're using today. Spices, I like to add little spices to my ferments. I have a little bit of coriander seed, black pepper, chili flake, fennel seed, and caraway. All of those spices take well to asparagus and carrots. So I'm going to start by putting in my spices, the bottom of my jar. You can add it at the top, but I feel like if you do that, they just kind of float and don't actually infuse the brine. So I like to put my spices, my dried spices in first. Then I'll put in my spring onion. And next I will go ahead and add in my asparagus and carrots. And so another reason or another thing to kind of look out for, you don't want to you want to stay away from using tap water, because a lot of times there's added chlorine and things like that in your water, in your tap water. So you always want to make sure you have filtered on hand. All right. So just put that up. Make sure you have a little bit of headroom. I like to, when I'm using a quart ball jar like this, I only go to about the top of here, this little lip, because it's going to start fermenting and CO2 is going to start building up, and you don't want to fill it all the way up to the top because it needs room to escape, and you don't want your brine to start overflowing and explode. So it's important to keep a little bit of headroom as well. I've weighed all of this stuff out prior to the presentation. So it's very important to measure out or weigh out all of your vegetables when you're doing a project like this, and weigh out the amount of water that you need to cover your vegetables. You do that, and then that will give you the, you can calculate the amount of salt that you need for your fermentation project. So I take the total amount of vegetables, the total amount of water that I have, and then I multiply that by 0.03, and that'll give me a 3% salt ratio. That is usually a good, 3% is a good and safe number when you're doing a lacto ferment on a vegetable. So I have my 26 grams of all natural sea salt. I'm just going to add that to my filtered water. Give that a stir and make sure it's all well incorporated and dissolved. There's no bits at the bottom. That looks good to me. Now I'm just going to pour over my vegetables.
What does lacto ferment mean?
There. And then I'm just going to loosely keep this lid on here. I don't want to tie it on super tight because, like I said, it's going to start producing that CO2, and I don't want this to be super tight. One thing you want to keep in mind when you're doing this is you'll want to actually burp it, what we call burping your ferment or your jar, to release that CO2 and it doesn't build up under your lid. And then one thing you'll notice, I don't think if you can kind of see it through this here, it's kind of cloudy. It's perfectly normal for your brine to turn cloudy. Right now it's super clear just because we just did this. But it'll turn cloudy over the next few days. You want to sit this on your your kitchen counter anywhere between 7 to 10 days, burping it daily. And the ideal temperature for a lacto fermentation or vegetable fermentation like this is around 65 to 72 degrees. I know with Texas weather in the summer, it can be really, really hard to keep it there, but just know that if you have a higher temperature in your house, the fermentation process is going to speed up. So a ferment like this would take closer to like 5 days. It just kind of depends on the environment. And so I kind of want to go over what lacto fermentation is. If you're really new to this and have never done any sort of project, that essentially means that the natural yeast and bacteria on your vegetable are feeding off each other and creating a lactic acid, which is why your ferment will start to taste sour. When it does that, it should lower the pH enough to make it safe to eat, and you have those nutrient-rich probiotics in there as well. So that whole transformation actually happens naturally with just the bacteria and the yeast that are on the vegetables themselves. You don't necessarily, some people do, some companies, food companies do as well. They will buy a store-bought or a manufactured culture and add it to a ferment. That's not all that, you don't have to do that. What this is more of a wild fermentation. It's using the stuff that's in the environment that's natural to the environment to create the lactic acid and preserve the vegetables themselves. So yeah, that's my little demo. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Yeah, we've got a few in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and just throw up that recipe that you had there, and then I'll move to the questions slide in just a second. But we have quite a few questions, some of which you addressed. So there's that recipe for anybody, since we only got to look at it for just a second. So let's start at the top. We had a question. Is there anything you can do with bottoms of asparagus that are too rough to eat? I know you did have asparagus in that ferment that you just made. Is there, do you have any other suggestions for something like an asparagus or like another green vegetable like that?
Yes, actually, I have I processed about 40 pounds of asparagus for a new ferment for my business. So I plan on using the woody ends of the asparagus to actually make a vinegar. I've done that in the past and it's really, really good. It's sort of olivey and acidic, if that makes sense. It's sort of like, it's really, really good. If you like olives and vinegar together, you're gonna like, I like to turn my wood ends from asparagus into vinegar, a vinegar scrap, or a asparagus scrap vinegar.
Very cool. So you did answer one question about water, about the additives that are in there, the chlorine that's in there. I had a question, if you don't have filtered water, can you boil tap water to evaporate that stuff?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
How often should a person eat fermented foods is another question.
If you're just starting out, I would you can do it daily. I would actually say every other day, but with another type of food. I wouldn't just sit there and like eat kraut out of a jar if your body's not used to it yet. but yeah, maybe every other day and then like work it into every day after that. See how your body feels.
Cool. There's another question that I find really compelling. Is it possible to add chili or jalapenos to a sauerkraut recipe? Do you have advice for doing so? Can you just mix it in with cabbage?
Absolutely. Oh yeah.
Sounds really good.
Oh yeah, it is. I've done that before. It is really good. I've done larger batches for like restaurants and things like that, but I think for if you're doing just like a half head of cabbage or a whole head of cabbage that you may have at home, I would probably do about, depending on what type of pepper, like if you were going to do a jalapeno, I would just do one pepper to one head of cabbage because it can get really spicy. It also, I mean, it's just your personal preference. You like really crazy blowout, spicy, then, you could do more. But as far as like a rounded, like good spicy, that's just added flavor to your kraut with the acidic acid or the lactic acid, I think one whole jalapeno would be a good ratio for that.
So you said 7 to 10 days for this particular recipe. Is
Mhm.
that a kind of a standard fermentation time for vegetable scraps and that sort of thing?
Yeah. And I think also, yeah, for a liquid brine like that, a salt brine ferment, yeah, 7 to 10 days is usually a good point, a good range. But it also is up to the person that's eating it and how sour they like things. But for me, and for a lot of, you can find it in a lot of fermentation books, a good range is 7 to 10 days.
I had another question. Can you, or perhaps just wanted to revisit something? Can you go back over how you calculated the 3%? I think can you just
Yeah.
give a little bit more detail on that?
Yeah. So the way you would calculate that is you would add the amounts, like you weigh out your vegetables, you have that amount, right? And then you weigh out your filtered water. You combine both of those, so it's the total that you get from the weight of your vegetables and water. That total is then multiplied by 0.03, and that gives you the 3% salt amount.
And that's pretty standard.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Let's see. A recipe I have says to use a non-reactive lid on the jar. What does that mean?
That's like glass or stainless steel, sort of something that won't rust or be porous enough to potentially contaminate the brine or vegetables.
Sense. Does more sour make the fermentation more potent in terms of benefits?
I mean, not necessarily, because when you're fermenting like if I'm doing a vegetable ferment and I say, okay, I did this carrot and asparagus ferment and it's been 9 days and I've tested the pH, it's at a good pH level, it's at 4.6 or below. The vegetables are still crunchy, it's sour, salty, it's good. I'm going to refrigerate it because I want to slow down the fermentation process at that point. If I let it keep going on my counter and keep it fermenting, what's going to happen is, yes, there will be more lactic acid being produced because the fermentation process is not stopped or slowed down. but the vegetables themselves are gonna the texture is gonna start to go. And what I mean by that, they're gonna start to mush out. They're gonna be really mushy because the lactic acid is still feeding off of them, and it's gonna keep breaking them down. So the integrity and the texture of the ferment, the vegetables themselves will actually start to decline as
All right, okay.
as the acid keeps building. Yeah.
Questions are rolling in still, so let's see if we can get to a few more.
Okay.
How long can you keep fermented foods in the fridge?
For me, I think it's been like anywhere between 4 to 6 months, as long as you keep the ferment under its brine or its own. Yeah, as long as it's pushed out, like if you have sauerkraut and you take some from the top, just be mindful if it's exposed to the air, that's the gap, the gap that's in between the lid and the top of the kraut itself, it's going to start to oxidize if it's not pushed back down under its brine, or you don't put like a little piece of plastic wrap or parchment paper or something to press down and make sure it's still covered and kind of like being preserved still under the lactic acid brine that's in there. So I just there's kind of a little note to keep in mind there. But yeah, usually 4 to 6 months.
And is there any situation that you would remove some of the brine to, or would you just keep it in there most, unchanged throughout the duration?
No, you can still keep the same brine in there as long as it's refrigerated. And then any extra brine, like I said, can be used as well, reused to flavor. I've used it in pastas instead of using lemon juice to flavor a pasta, or making a salad dressing. I've used sauerkraut brine before when I've made salad dressing. So you always keep the brines as well. They're essentially probiotics in liquid form and really tasty.
Excellent. Well, we're kind of closing in on the hour. If anybody has any last questions, now is probably the time. I do want to, of course, direct people to the slide that's up right now that has all of your different social media accounts. If people want to keep up with Native Ferments. I know that you said that just searching for Jessica Alonso in YouTube is the best way to find that channel. Do you have anything else that you want to shout out?
Yeah, I mean, if you follow me on Instagram, I will weekly, I will post where I'll be at as far as local farmers markets. Right now I'm selling at the Good Local Farmers Market in White Rock and Lakewood Village. So you can get those updates and support local and small businesses that way. If you're a little far away and want to get ferments shipped to you, you can always visit my website and we'll ship those out. If you want to do, interested in doing a in-person workshop or fermentation class, you can email me at info@nativefermentstx, and we can customize a learning fermentation class for you with a group of people. And check out and subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you search for my name and subscribe, I do weekly fermentation videos and whole utilization videos. So those are always fun to make, and you can get helpful recipes and tips that way as well. So yeah, that's all I got.
Very cool. Yeah, we got one more question I think you addressed. Check out the YouTube page for other recipes and check out your website. Well, I just want to say on behalf of everybody here at the library and all of our attendees, I can say that this is a really engaging presentation. People had a lot of questions and probably learned a lot today. So thanks so much for taking the time to join us and do this program with us.
Oh, thank you guys for having me. I really enjoyed today, and I'm glad we had some good questions, and hopefully sparked some inspiration in home kitchens, and people learned some stuff today. And I'm really excited to be part of the Grow With Us program. You guys are doing great things, so thank you.
Well, thanks again. Thanks, Nidra. There's lots of thank yous coming in the chat in case you can't see those.
Awesome,
And
thank
make
you.
sure, yeah, everybody join us next week for our next program. Nidra, do you have anything you want to add?
No, not at all. Thank you. But like you said, it was a great program. Thank you, Jessica, for being today's speaker.
Oh, thank you so much for reaching out. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Enjoyed it.
Enjoy.
All right.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Everyone, have a good one. Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.